very disruptive year. We are facing one of the biggest crises in tourism nowadays, with 22% of in a downturn of tourism. We also have a lot of different 57% of a downturn in tourism, and everything is locked and frozen. So we have very few to do in this scenario. And because of that, I enter in first to review what the destination management organizations did. Then I will also present some about what the consumers thought about this crisis and this lockdown. And last but not least, I will finish with some proposals that we developed last year. So, what is the rules of destination management organization? Destination management organizations are in charge of planning, research, and marketing, and they also are the guardians of the country's destination image. So they have a very difficult, they were facing a very difficult time during this crisis of the COVID, with the COVID frozen everything. Because we need to, but what is the destination image? Okay, destination image is still a very difficult and complex construct. We need to understand what is the destination image, and for that we use qualitative research, mostly based on content analysis and visual methods. So we take out all the photos and the message the destination management organizations share along the lockdown times to understand what they are proposing to overcome this crisis. So, first, we check all the videos and photos. We also content analyze the destination management organization's messages, and we use image processing theory to understand what they are proposing. Our sample was all over the world, but in this case, I will focus mostly in South Africa, Kenya, and Morocco, African countries where we did a very deeply understanding of what the destination management organizations were proposing. So all of these destinations were with the travel restrictions. They also share some videos about the countries, and the videos, you could see the videos. I have no time to show to you, but they are very interesting and very insightful for that. So, what are the main results that we saw in these messages? First of all, they were sharing that we need to stay safe at home. We need to keep strong and united with hope and faith. And we need to experience virtual experience, but also to remember and to share to good times we have had while traveling. So most of the messages were related with the time, suggesting that this is a temporary crisis and we will be able to travel again later. And what is going on is only postpone what we are trying to do today. So we did a lexical analysis of the messages, and as you could see here, most of the messages were stay at home, keep strong and safe, okay? Because one day you will be able to share, to see and to visit again. So keep your hope on that, and meanwhile try to share your memories and to share your stories and your experiences in these countries. These were most of the message that we saw, so they were trying to be very optimistic at these times. When we go through the message, it's very interesting because what we saw there is that stay, nature, world, time, love, future, together, inspire because you will be, the time to travel again will come again very soon. So one of the most amazing message that I saw was one from the Kenya. For this message was mostly focused on the magic of nature and wildlife life, with a disclaimer: the magic waits. So Kenya is magic and we could wait to see this again. Okay. It's an adventure of the lifetime, and we will do this tomorrow, not today, because today we will not be able to travel. Okay, we will explore and conserve with more enthusiasm the land that choose us. We are the greatest coincidence, the greatest causality. The world is quiet now. We will celebrate together, so the hope, and we need to see each other as one. We need to see each other because tourism is all about human relationships, and together we can. Let's help the countries to survive, because one day we will be able to travel again and to do it later, not now, but later. Perhaps in a very short time, we will be able to travel again, because the magic and the experiences Africa could offer to us will be back again. Also, when we checked the pictures, what we saw was all about hope. We will be there. We will be waiting for you with open arms. The ethics of care. So take care of the others, because we love you and we are waiting for you with kisses and open arms and huge hugs, because we need to stay together. But now, this time, with respect for the nature. We need to respect the nature. So we need to develop tourism. We could travel again, but now with more respect for the nature. Also, the message that they sent to the world was about quietness. Everything is empty, waiting for us. And inspiration. Do not forget us, because we are here waiting for you, only waiting for this crisis overcome. So when back, just try, do not cancel your trip, postpone, because one day you will be able to come again. Now that we saw that everyone, the destination management organizations, were trying to share a message of hope and respect for the sustainability, and also a human relationship in travel experiences, we need to understand how the tourists were feeling about this, and they were not very, very happy. Why? Okay, we use the model of Philip Pearce, the components of the tourism experience, because we understand, we assume that tourism, preparing the trip, planning the trip is also a tourism experience, and because of that, we depict the planning process in affective components, sensorial relationships, context, cognitive elements, and behavioral components to understand how they feel about an experience that didn't happen at all. So we found 6 topics. The first topic relates relationships with affective components. So honestly, that last update makes me nervous about keeping my trip on the 20, as this travel could potentiate symptoms of COVID in my family. So they were not only worried about themselves, but also about their peers. They were very sad that they are not able to travel, okay, and they are waiting for some refund policies, okay. The second topic was related with the contest. So I'm flying over next Saturday and I have all my fingers and toes crossed that everything will okay. So they will want to take the risk to travel. I'm still looking forward to arrive on Saturday in South Africa. If I end up staying because of all this, I can think of a better place to be stuck. So it seems that Africa is a very nice place to be locked down. Okay? Also, the topic 3 was about contest and behavior. So I don't consider myself a paranoid person at all. And to be honest, I have been known to push myself to limits on occasion, but I have a trip and I have to postpone. I'm not able to go anymore, okay? They have to make the decision to not go because they are afraid of the COVID. We are following about cognitive information, so we are following the posts in Facebook to have an informed decision. They didn't postpone, but they are trying to understand what's going on and what they could do. Or the other that said to us, we cannot travel with young child due to the virus situation. But I don't have any official advice about that. Okay, so it was missing a lot of information during these uncertain times. And also topic 5 was about affective components and sensorial elements. I'm feeling a bit uncertain. I'm getting into a panic mode, and because of the lack of information, I have faith in the government here to do some effective to protect against the virus. So they want to travel, but they are willing to have some protection, some information from the states. Or topic 6 that was only about behavioral, and they said to us that closure of an event should mean that refunds will follow. We are living in extraordinary times, so they are also willing to have some answers from the tour operators as well. Okay, about the COVID, what we saw here, the blue line is the number of new cases in Africa, okay? During the months of March, April, and May, we start with cases in Africa in middle March, but we start to be very concerned about this very before the beginning of the cases in Africa. And we keep very concerned about this in Africa. Okay, so tourists trying to travel to Africa are very concerned about what is going to happen if they travel to there. Okay, so we have a very, very mixed effect. When we go through the topics for Africa, only for Africa, what we saw is that the most important dimensions were the cognitive, as you could see here, 25%, and also the affective and behavioral components. So the most important are cognitive, affective, lack of information, affective. I really want to go to Africa, but I'm afraid of, and about information from the companies. Okay, what could I do if I have to be stuck in Africa? What the companies will do if I'm stuck there, if I have to postpone my travel to there? They are very concerned about this. So they said to us, this is like go to from a dream to a nightmare. Okay, so we were very positive to go to Africa, but nowadays we are very concerned about our trip. So, about this crisis, what were the perceptions of the tourists? They were looking for trust, safety, security, and certification. They were trying to find out a way to feel very, very, very safe and secure, and with the feeling that we will be very secure there and we do not have any kind of health problems if I go to Africa or to everywhere, any other place. What about innovative strategies? What I think about Africa is the best place, unlike the crisis that we are living nowadays. Africa is the best place to recover from this crisis. Why? Because Africa has the perfect scenarios to enter in ecotourism development. Okay? Try to make the tourists feel safe because they are able to walk around and to feel the sense of Africa, the spirit of Africa with the nature and wildlife without contacts or without the context that they do not have to, they do not need to have nowadays. Nature tourism is also a very important product, tourism service nowadays. And I think that also astrotourism could be a potential segment to attract tourists to Africa. And they are growing everywhere. Also, indigenous tourism is very, very interesting because it recalls the culture of Africa, and it gives a sense of authenticity that is so called nowadays in tourism. And also wellness tourism, not only wellness based on spas, but also based on spiritual wellness. Okay, so we could think about to be in retreats and to be alone and to think about the way we are living nowadays. That is very, very stressful. Also, we could organize a kind of customized routes with a few number of tourists, more luxury tourist routes, around the desert or around the nature, just to make people, tourists, feel secure. And also we could do a lot of merchandising and virtual tours. Art and mindfulness could be also a very important product, and couch surfing, recalling for the authenticity, is also a very, very good product to attract young people to Africa. And combining this with voluntary tourism could be a very important issue to develop and to sustain tourism in Africa. About housekeeping, okay, about housekeeping, I think that we need to change the setting of the hotels, okay? The room designs need to be changed and redesigned as fast as possible, not only for the guests' sense of safety and hygiene, but also for hotels that need to cut down so costs to get relief from the lack of customers. For instance, I would suggest that hotels take out carpets and accessories in rooms that are not viable anymore, and they will have too much. If they have too much at the rooms, we need to clean much more things, and this costs a lot of money. In terms of gastronomy, we need to introduce some measures as well, like the vacuum cooking, the implementation of pasteurization methods, to freezing the ingredients, and to vacuum packaging with control atmosphere. Also, the ozone generators should be implemented at the hotels to purify the air, and the daily check of the restaurants' air conditioners is more than needed nowadays. At the airports, we need to filter the air, okay, to combat, to avoid the virus to overcome. Also, in terms of personalized apps for hotels, we need to digitalize all the operations of the hotels. Why? Because contactless and cashless is very, very important nowadays at the hotels, okay? When we talk about digital transformation of the hotels in terms of operations, it doesn't mean that we will finish without human contact. Rather, it means that we do not have to contact or to pay or to do the check-in with documents, with our identity card and things like that, but rather we could talk and to have a drink or to have a very good reception, but without touching papers and cards to pay for what we have at the hotels. So self-service technologies are very important, but I don't think robots will be important in these places, because I still think that, okay, we need to digitalize all the operations at the hotels, but still we need to keep the human relation and the people-to-people business that tourism is made of, okay? I think that we need to be very, very optimistic. Why? Because Africa has the best scenario to recover, and also because even if the situation is not easy, we have the best scenarios to develop new products and to recover from this to this crisis. So my advice is only to offer your diversity, offer the nature, the wildlife, and be yourself, because tourism will come again. And this time totally sure that tourism will prefer the natural destinations much more than the overcrowded cities. Thank you for listening me. I hope you enjoy. I don't know if it was too fast, but anyhow, I was trying to not bother you too much, but just to share with you some of my thoughts in a very short way.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Antonia Correia, for sharing with us your research findings about the DMO roles in building resilience in this pandemic time, and also going a step further to show the specific recommendations maybe for housekeeping, for products that can be done to better communicate during the pandemic by DMOs. So just to alert the delegates about the afternoon's presentation, we had given extra time to Professor Correia's presentation. So at this time, we'll go back to a session for question and answer with her before proceeding to the next session. So I would like just to give a brief summary of her presentation for those of you who might have joined late. What I picked out as very important for this presentation was how her presentation highlighted the role of DMO's communication that can be able to maintain the image for Destination Africa as a dream destination, because her presentation, research findings from her presentation just show how different communication strategies or focus on different issues, maybe the cognitive element or the affective element, can turn the dream into a nightmare for some clients. And what was very worth paying attention to was they did an analysis of how DMOs globally were communicating during the pandemic. And part of this analysis reached out to the DMO in Kenya, in South Africa, and in Morocco. So from this communication, most of their messages were about building the connection, message about timing, telling travelers to travel tomorrow, messages about nature, messages about postponing trips. And I think we can relate to global level discussions from the WTTC and the UNWTO, which had some slogans, related slogans, that is, together in travel or travel tomorrow. And even there was one for tourism strong, emphasizing connectedness. But beyond that, the team that Professor Antonia worked with looked at how these messages were being interpreted by the tourists or the target audiences. And when tourists felt that there isn't much information out there, that is when they started having worries about destination. And that is why one of the slides that she highlighted was there was a comment like from a dream to a nightmare. So it is very, very important to look at how DMOs are communicating during this time. And she came up with the last bit were some recommendations on the possible areas, from products to housekeeping to even airlines, on how communication can be used to bring assurance to travelers. So Professor Correa, I think we have one question for you in the chat message. Maybe you can read it and respond to it. For the rest of the delegates, feel free to share your questions with Professor Correa. Yeah, based on her presentation in tourism, economy, and entrepreneurship.
Thank
Professor
you.
Correa?
I don't know if you want me to answer writing or talking about, but I could start with astrotourism. Astrotourism is a very new product, but is also a very important product, because this kind of people, they spend a lot of money. They want to be looking for the evening, so they have very nice dinners. They stay at very good hotels, and they want to see the stars and the sky. So the increasing of this market segment is very important, and I think that Africa has the perfect scenarios, even because you have a very open sky with a very good weather to see the stars and to understand and to attract this kind of market segment that is growing everywhere. Yes, you have very good skies to do that. Much better than in overcrowded cities. So this is a very nice market to be developed in Africa, I suppose. The question of Alan, what are the three major points would help put Africa ahead of other destinations in getting tourism going again? I think nature, authenticity, wildlife, and a very clear message that people do not have to be worried to travel again to Africa. Okay? I have been in Africa 3 years ago, and it was one of the most amazing experiences that I have had while traveling around. I think that was one of the best destinations that I ever visited. Okay, so I want to come again to Africa and to see every time, because the sense of freedom that we could experience in Africa is amazing. It's something that we are not able to experience in a very big city full of cultural monuments, but all of them man-made. What you have is something that is different from the other countries because is not based on man-made attractions. What you have is real attractions, okay? So if you explore a little bit, I don't like too much the term explore, but anyhow, if you want to take advantage of the authenticity that you have, if you are able to take advantage of the real attractions of Africa, I think with a very assertive message that we are safe in Africa, no one will have doubts to travel to Africa, I suppose. So tourism will come again.
Yeah,
we have more questions?
Yeah, if you've responded to the questions on the chat, then I still have one question for you.
Yes.
Your study says that you looked at 40,000 online responses from some tourists. Was there any consideration whether these tourists were first-time visitors, maybe to Africa, or repeat visitors, that maybe some of them may be frustrated in their responses or in their feelings, or the ones who already love the destination wouldn't care about even the communication? Was there any consideration in the differences within these responses from the tourists?
Yes, as you saw, we have different components of the message. The first one was the affective, the informative, the cognitive, the contest, and everyone. So, in terms of affective, the effect was more or less mixed. Some of people were afraid, mostly because of their peers or their family more than because of themselves. And the others are not worried about to travel to Africa, even because they think this is the perfect place to be locked down. And I really think that is the best place to be locked down, okay? But the other people, what was missing in these messages was a clear proposition of the tour operators, and most of them, they are international, not based in Africa, okay? About what is going on if they have to be stuck in Africa or if they are not able to go, okay? I think that who fails in this process of the crisis was not the destination management organizations, because they were very proactive, sharing a lot of very interesting and very friendly messages. Who failed on this process was the tour operators, okay? They were in need to have a proactive response to the tourists that were with books and booking travels and trips and flights and all of these things, and they were not answering the people, okay? So I don't think that the problem was the DMOs, and you saw that the DMOs share very, very nice messages. They were still selling hope, not destinations, and this is very important. All these destinations were selling hope. Okay, you are not able to come now, but you could come later, okay? But the tour operators were missing to answer the people, the tourists. And this was the biggest problem that I saw in the comments of the tourists.
Thank you, Professor Antonia, for the response.
I think that I have two more questions here. If I have time, I could answer. Do you want I answer this?
No, I would prefer we answer after presentation from the next speaker, because I think questions are coming more and more, and your research is very, very detailed. It can have more than 100 questions if we allow.
Okay, so I will keep. We will have more time to interact with people.
Yes, we will have more time after the next presenter finishes her presentation.
So I will listen to the other one. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Correia, and thank you so much all the delegates for engaging. So as I told you earlier on, the afternoon's presentation is about the theme of tourism economy and entrepreneurship to build resilience in Africa. And we have a very good lineup of speakers. The next two speakers, I would like to introduce them. We have Professor Karla Boluk from the University of Waterloo, and she's going to speak about sustainability in resilience. If you're wondering what the SDGs are all about, she'll be able to break it down. She will tell us whether resilience is all good or there can be some form of resilience that needs to be looked at. She's all about her presentation. I know will really be critical, and she's a professor at the University of Waterloo in Canada, a professor of leisure and recreation studies. So, and the next presenter is Professor Ljubica Kneževic from University of Ljubljana in Slovakia. She is also a professor in the School of Business and Economics in the University of Ljubljana, and she has extensive experience in the EU and Slovenia about building resilience and recovery in tourism. So as the norm is, when the speakers are doing their presentations, feel free to send in your comments in the chat section and also your questions. Then after the presentation, we will have a time to interact with all the speakers. So let me welcome Professor Karla Boluk to start her presentation. Welcome.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Are you gonna do my slides, or will I do them myself and will you give me access to share them?
Yeah, Job can help you do the slides, my colleague. I think he has the slides. Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Thanks so much, Job. My name is Karla Boluk, as Lucy mentioned. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Recreation and Leisure Studies at the University of Waterloo. And I'm also the co-chair of Tourism Education Futures Initiative. Yeah, so we'll get started. The title of my presentation is called Reevaluating Success and Mobilizing Sustainability Practices in Tourism to Support Resiliency. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this has been an incredibly hard year, and it's been a really long year for some. I was reflecting on the weekend as I was waiting in the queue to get my vaccine. The vaccines really promote optimism. They're a cause for optimism, especially for those who are interested in engaging in travel pursuits once again. The tourism literature is saturated right now with scholarship suggesting that the halt to tourism over the last year or so has given us the much needed break that we needed in order to reimagine and to repurpose and reset tourism, especially in the context of all the problematic impacts that tourism has generated to the environment, to peoples, and to cultures. And this is an outcome of kind of the horrible hamster wheel that we're on in the context of focusing on mass tourism. And so while the idea of reimagining a better industry offers hope, it also takes a lot of work. And this is problematic given the capitalistic markets are looking to rebound after this really long pause in tourism. And so one of my fears is that sustainability and a sustainability focus may be somewhat tangential, given the interest in making up for lost time since we've had this pause in tourism. So I think this is why it's so important tourism producers ask important questions regarding how they may make responsible choices in light of sustainability considerations. And a particular question I pose to everyone to consider during my talk is how might we lead with purpose and contribute to sustainable and regenerative futures? And so I just want to take a moment to talk a little bit about my understanding of sustainability. Sustainability to me is focused on being resilient, regenerative, having a long-term vision of the future with honor and respect for all living things. Focused on intergenerational equity, and I'm really interested in this notion of learning from youth and teaching youth, and this bilateral kind of communication we can have, and also learning and teaching that can be we can engage in and learn from older generations. And then also being aware of planetary boundaries, focused on long-term vision, and also focusing on this notion of care and ethics of care. So I just want to return to the first piece and just define regenerative a little bit further, because I think this is really important in the context of the discussions today. So regenerative tourism is a newer approach to tourism understanding based on the concept that tourism should be more than just sustainable. So in fact, tourism should seek to actually improve the places that we offer and engage in tourism practices. So regenerative tourism is a holistic approach with the aim of making a tangible and positive impact. Next slide, please. So I thought I'd just take a moment to reflect on my trajectory. I carried out my PhD research at Otago University in New Zealand on the South Island in a beautiful city called Dunedin. And when I started off my research, my PhD research, I started off with an interest in ethics and exploring ethics in tourism. And then as I did some more reading, I became interested in notions of fair trade and how that may apply to tourism. And then I came across a certification in South Africa called Fair Trade Tourism in South Africa. Fair trade tourism was an under-researched area in the literature, and so my dissertation explored the impact of fair trade tourism in South Africa on the communities, specifically in rural contexts, as they sought to move forward beyond apartheid that took place between 1948 and 1994. So my research findings discovered that there were some key individuals who had benefited from the apartheid system, who were keen to give back to society and work alongside communities in recovering from apartheid. And in some cases, I learned that the work resulted in a reduction or in some cases, eradication of poverty in some of these communities. I visited one community called Boluk, which is along the Eastern Cape of South Africa. And he had created a backpackers lodge there. He had traveled all over South Africa. And he was really passionate about finding a way in which he could create a business model that would create a synergy between sustainability, rural development, and tourism. And I carried out several interviews with inspiring business owners and managers in South Africa. And this was my first kind of exposure to this concept of social entrepreneurship. And so stemming from my PhD, I've developed a concurrent line of research focused on tourism social entrepreneurs. I wasn't familiar with this term when I was in the field collecting my data, but when I returned to my desk, I learned that there was this burgeoning body of literature on individuals keen to disrupt business as usual, keen to work on projects that would challenge capitalism and make tangible contributions to the communities and broader society. So I'll return to my section on tourism social entrepreneurs in just a moment. I've really been influenced by some critical pedagogues, including Paulo Freire, as pictured here, Henry Giroux, Ira Shore, Stephen Brookfield, and more recently, a feminist scholar, Bell Hooks, specifically in thinking about critical thinking. And critical thinking to me-
Please, you can share your slide. I think Job has some technical challenges on his side.
No problem. Could you give me access to be able to do that? I think I need permission.
You have access.
I do. Okay, perfect. There we are. Perfect. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Fantastic. So I've really been influenced by some of these critical pedagogues, and really what I wanted to hone here is that I have always thought of critical thinking as being like an important role of us as professors to have. But what I've been thinking about is that it's incredibly important for us all to have a role in educating stakeholders in tourism. So it's not just professors, but outside of our role of professors, tourism producers also have a role in teaching and educating those who visit their businesses. Some of my research is focused on basically training students to be critical citizens, critical tourism citizens, so that they are equipped with the tools in making responsible decisions when they are employed as professionals in the field of tourism, and also in their role as tourists. Now, here's the just a wheel of the Sustainable Development Goals here. So it seemed as though when Lucy introduced me earlier that maybe you've already touched upon the SDGs and some of the other talks. I think that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is a really important framework, and I've carried out a considerable amount of research over the last few years using the framework as a tool for us in tourism to think about how we can progress sustainability. I think the most important contributions that I've made within the context of thinking through using the SDGs as a framework in tourism is really honing on some of the absences. We've critiqued the SDGs quite a lot, particularly honing SDG 12, which is focused on responsible consumption and production. This is a capitalist, this is a neoliberal ideology kind of focused on, encouraging us to produce and consume. Coming from a North American context, whenever there's any kind of catastrophe, our governments and premiers are constantly telling us to go out and spend. And actually, we've noticed this quite a lot with COVID-19. We've wavered going on a shutdown or a lockdown as a consequence of our premier here in Ontario, really focusing on supporting local businesses, which is incredibly important, as well as aligning that with the safety of our communities. The SDGs are really important to tourism because the United Nations in 2017 established that that would be the year, the UN declared 2017 as the year for the International Year of Sustainable Development. And so tourism was really kind of positioned as an industry to advance the SDGs. And so it's important that we use a critical lens to reflect on the problems that exist in the world and then determine how we might be able to intervene on those. And the 17 problems that we've been tasked with progressing helps us with a lens in which to do that. And
Dr. Karla, allow me to interrupt you. I just sent you a direct message. Please check it as you proceed. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
okay. I'm so sorry. I don't see any messages.
Okay, proceed.
Okay.
I just wanted to let you know that the screen, your whatever is not on slideshow mode. It's on presenter view.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I will see if I can change that. Okay. Might just start over here.
Maybe you just continue the same way you are. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay. I'll just pull up my slides again. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'll hop along here. Alrighty. Yeah, I'm not sure how to change that.
Okay. Just proceed.
Is that better?
No worries. Yeah, just proceed. It's okay.
Okay. I think that's better. Okay. Okay, so I think I made my point about the SDGs and the importance of the SDGs to tourism, and us all having a role in educating travelers. So I wanted to return to the piece about tourism social entrepreneurs. So this has occupied my scholarly attention over the last few years. And what's important about tourism social entrepreneurs is they offer a specific model to challenge capitalism, as I mentioned before. The main focus is being catalysts for social change within communities. So social entrepreneurs are recognized as change agents, disruptors, creators who frame challenges and implement responses by way of a product or a service with the intention of proving a social need and contributing to enhanced well-being. And social entrepreneurs, importantly, have promoted a broad range of solutions that align with the Sustainable Development Goals decades before the SDGs were even created. My research on tourism social entrepreneurs has drawn attention to business owners who have enhanced the well-being of the communities in which they operate. And so I just want to reflect on a few examples of projects that the social entrepreneurs that I worked with in South Africa have worked on. So there's a huge focus on educational programs, and in a community that I visited along the Eastern Cape called Boluk, they focused a rehabilitation of a school that was lost in a landslide. Other projects focused on the provision of meals and uniforms, educational supplies such as books, preschool and after school care, focusing on youth programming. There was a community that I visited that organized township tours called Calabash Tours. And they really focused on skill development and an emphasis on micro enterprise programming. There's focus on health and nutrition, so cultivating seedling gardens and vegetable gardens for communities, an emphasis on HIV and AIDS awareness, and basic services to ensure clean access to water and sanitation facilities. Just by way of a few other examples, this may be interesting to others. I have a few examples here of businesses who have who are social entrepreneurs themselves, and they've also done some pretty amazing things, and these can be used as examples for anybody interested in more information. So there's Good Travel, who was started by Eliza Raymond, and she's focused on sustainable and responsible travel opportunities and experiences. And then there's Moving Mountains, which is started by Gavin Bates. And he's really focused on programming, supporting street kids, primary schools, and communities around the world. And then a quintessential example, and I encourage everybody to check out this website, is Vicky, who started Earth Changers. And she has a vision for facilitating trips that change the world. And she sets the goal of making a positive impact, engaging with people behind places to reveal their true passions and purposes to address big issues. And I've never seen anything like this before, but on her website, she's aligned a number of her programs and activities with the SDGs. And so this is a perfect example of a social entrepreneur who's providing education for those who are interested in taking her up on some of the travel opportunities. Two of the three examples here are female social entrepreneurs. And in the previous slide, I just made a note that in the literature, I've noticed in my time reading that there's an absence in the literature focused on the role of women as tourism social entrepreneurs. And this is kind of in line with the dominant kind of masculine focus, economic focus on successful entrepreneurs. And so I think this understanding is juxtaposed with the understanding that women are recognized as essential change agents in communities, and they're generally more purpose-driven than men and more likely to initiate businesses with the intention of making a difference and also enhancing community well-being. So I think the unique opportunities that women present is important, and I think we don't have a very good understanding of the barriers or challenges that women face in starting their own enterprises. And this is particularly important given the context of COVID, because COVID has affected women in different ways.
Claudia, Karla, it's Marina. I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you just put it on the slide? It's a shame because you've got great presentation. We can't see it.
You can't see my slides?
We can see your opening slide. So you need to click on the slide you're working on. Otherwise, it's a shame. You've got a really nice.
Thank you. Thanks, Marina. I'm not sure what's going on here. Can you see the purpose economy slide?
Yes, leave it like this. I mean,
okay.
We can see the presentation slide, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Please.
Okay. Sorry for my technological difficulties. Okay. So thanks so much for that, Marina. So I just wanted to mention the importance of the purpose economy, and specifically given the context of COVID, we really need to think about how we can move forward in a sustainable and fashion and honing kind of regeneration. We want to give something back to the communities in which we visit and the communities in which we're offering tourism from. So purpose economy is focused on the creation of positive and impactful services and products, emphasizing a strong sense of community, and also creating space for personal growth. Scholars have been making noise for decades and decades about the importance of tourism, and particularly recognizing the tourism industry and the knock-on effect for the supply chain. So COVID has been a live case study for us. And moving forward post-vaccine is relevant more now than ever before to think about purpose and our purpose specifically. So how might we do this? So here are some of my suggestions based on some of my research over the last few years. It seems to me that all stakeholders involved in tourism have work to do to become better and do better. Some work that I've carried out with colleagues here, we've suggested that governments could review the structures of their tourism industries, encouraging, if not enforcing, organizations to follow sustainable social enterprise models. And I wrote a paper in 2018 advocating for social entrepreneurs to be taken seriously, and specifically for them to be considered as a key stakeholder in their role in rural tourism development. So purpose serves a need for people to develop themselves as human beings, being part of a community and affect something greater than themselves. And based on my research on tourism social entrepreneurs, this is how they've been driven. Specifically in South Africa, the entrepreneurs that I worked with there and who I interviewed experienced society at its absolute worst. The treatment of Black people and the treatment of colored people was so bad during the apartheid that trauma experienced led them to trying to make their people and society thrive. And I think this is really important because in the context of the social entrepreneurship literature, oftentimes trauma is a motivating factor for starting a social enterprise. So we need to facilitate the shift from exploitative approaches performed by multinational corporations to community partnerships and empowerment approaches. So a lot of the literature pre-COVID was focused on the impacts of tourism, specifically referring to over-tourism, how some destinations are busting at the seams, and thinking about how we can respond to that. And degrowth in tourism is one response. So one of the key questions is how can we shift tourism away from the power agendas that support growth? And changing tourism education is essential so that future leaders of tourism policy and planning understand tourism in terms of a moral endeavor and in terms of the value for human well-being. And some recent work on pedagogies that are critical and transformative really hones this. In terms of focusing on progressive tourism developments that would benefit from thinking through a context of tourism, in line with citizenship and concerns with responsible tourism and responsibility in tourism. So further thinking about how education is or could be a core piece of tourism products is going to be increasingly important from the traveler perspective. As they seek to engage in meaningful travel opportunities. And I return to the example of Vicky, the tourism social entrepreneur who started that Earth Changers social enterprise as an outstanding example of how tourism producers may play a role in education. Another piece that we've spent some time thinking about in the literature is actually providing a redefinition of tourism, and this can help guide us. So to achieve the goal of a just degrowth in tourism really needs to be redefined. And current textbook definitions of tourism place the nature of the demand of tourists and the industry and the products and services that they provide in the center of the definition. But tourism for sustainability and degrowth must really focus on the needs and the interests of local communities. So just to provide an example, in 2010, the United Nations World Tourism Organization defined tourism like this. Tourism comprises the activities of persons traveling to and staying in places outside their usual environment for not more than one consecutive year for leisure, business, or other purposes. So this definition reinforces the dominance of neoliberalism and prioritizes an understanding of tourism as a business sector rather than a social cultural force. And it has serious implications for the future of tourism. So I've been involved with several colleagues in redefining tourism. And we describe tourism as the process of local communities inviting, receiving, and hosting visitors in their local community for limited time durations, with the intention of receiving benefits from such actions. And such forms of tourism may be facilitated by businesses operating to commercial imperatives, or may be facilitated by nonprofit organizations. But in this restructure of tourism operators would be allowed to access, or they would be allowed access to local communities' assets only under their authorization and stewardship. Next, my suggestion is that we reconsider how we evaluate success. So my social justice lens encourages me to be critical of current frameworks we operate within, and a great deal of my pedagogical scholarship and work on social entrepreneurs and focusing on sustainable tourism scholarship, I've reflected on how we might be able to operate differently given the neoliberal pressures and neoliberal ideology and capitalistic markets. We need to rethink how we evaluate the benefits of tourism, focusing on local community and going beyond the fragile economic benefits offered by multinational corporations and their propensity to support leakages. So steps to degrowth transition require us to reevaluate and shift our values and conceptualize entrenched capitalist concepts. I recently wrote a book chapter for Higgins-Desbois' book focused on socializing tourism. And we focused on caring as our starting point, as our theoretical lens. So we have a role as teachers, as parents, aunts, uncles, business owners in mentoring and modeling best behaviors and practices. And an example we used in our writing was this Maori and Taki promise. Air New Zealand has recently incorporated an in-flight channel educating their passengers on the Taki promise. And similar to feminist perspectives I drew attention to earlier, engaging in Indigenous wisdom is imperative for us to near sustainability and regenerative futures. So we hone the Maori Taki promise in our thinking through an ethics of care and limits of sustainability, and we refer to as carrying capacity. After reflecting on the carelessness of tourism as a consequence and all the negative outcomes as a consequence of mass tourism, we focus on the philosophy of caring and how reflecting on this might, and the capacity to care might lead to significant transformations. So by drawing on Indigenous ways of knowing, the Taki promise helps travelers realize the important role they play in demonstrating care for peoples, for the place, and for the culture. So just to conclude, we as scholars and those who work in tourism systems must put in the work to understand the current situation and critically reflect on how we may do better to progress sustainability goals. And it's imperative we continue to challenge capitalist systems that drives in the cycle of production and consumption, and think about what we've learned from tourism social entrepreneurs to set the stage for how we may move forward. Social entrepreneurs certainly need a seat at the table. And if all stakeholders lead with a purpose beyond just thinking about self-serving, will have the capacity to contribute to real change and support progress towards sustainability. And what is absolutely required is prioritizing those who are affected by tourism. Thank you so much.
A very big thank you to Professor Karla for your awesome presentation. I think she has explained the specifics of how we can put sustainability in resilience. And her main area of focus was on social entrepreneurship, which considers some aspects of the SDGs, even before the SDGs were there, then purpose-driven economy. Then finally, there are 5 key recommendations. And I think for me, the most memorable one is we need to care more. I had initially misread that as carrying capacity. Then I realized it was a caring capacity, which is a very interesting concept. But we also need to degrow tourism. We need to redefine tourism, give agency to the hosting community, reevaluate successes of tourism. This is something that Judy keeps on emphasizing, that the success story of tourism must be shared with destination communities. Then reconsider how we do tourism. Yeah, and reevaluate successes. So as usual, you can send in your questions in the chat messages. Professor Karla will be able to respond to the question after the final presentation from Professor Ljubica. So one question for you, Professor Karla, to think about. One of the recommendations was about degrowing tourism. Is there a sustainable size of tourism? I think that would be the first question you will answer, plus check for more questions in the chat section. You're welcome now, Professor Ljubica. Professor Ljubica is going to speak about recovery and resilience in tourism. Welcome and do your own introduction.
Lucy, many thanks for the introduction, and I will just briefly start. Before we start with the presentation, before I start with the presentation, I'm just going to greet you from Slovenia. Slovenia is the greenest country in Europe and almost the greenest country in the world. This behind me is just a scene from Slovenia. It's very green at the moment because the summer hopefully is coming. So basically my presentation today, my research work, I'm working at Ljubljana, very much based on sustainability. So I've been working in sustainability for the last 20 years and the last, let's say, 7 years intensively on changing the consumer behavior, or actually tourist behavior, towards pro-environmentally friendly. But that's not going to be a talk today. Today, I'm going to be talking about the resilience and recovery of tourism, because I have to say, the last year and a half, I've been working very little on research and be working a lot on policy documents. We just finished the document for the European Parliament on relaunching the tourism and transport. Been working on a couple of documents for Slovenian government and tourism board, trying to help to think about the recovery strategies that are in front of us. So I'm talking about that today, and I'm just going to share the screen. I cannot share the whole slide, but you will see the slides on the side. This is because I have to. I tried it, but then my computer is getting crazy if I do that. So, but you will be able to see the presentation. So I'm sharing it right now. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So basically, yes, the topic I'm going to cover today is tourism, and I'm going to tackle what Karla was saying. And that's the first which I start. It's actually tourism as we know. Tourism as we know is a tourism of extensive growth. As the economist, you just need a basic figures. You don't need a super technical regression and I don't know, panel data sets to figure this out. You just have to take a number of tourists in 1950s and look the number of tourists that we had internationally in 2019. During this period of time, the number of tourists increased for 60 times. At the same time, the global GDP increased for 10 times. So, you know, doing a simple math, you know, we were witnesses of 6 times more extensive growth of tourism than the growth of the global economy. So the tourism was, and it is, the child of globalization. The whole economic and social system was really empowering tourism to grow, and to grow more and more and more. And I don't know any of the tourism strategies, not even now, when we talk about the resilience building, that is not going to set up the growth goals within its essence. And the most of the strategies that we are working on are really urging to go back in 2019. Even though we really, as the academics and tourism experts are saying that where we were was not, you know, was possibly the dead-end streets. Going to try to thrive, to go back, let's do it smarter than we did it before. So questions that we were asking ourselves just before the pandemic was, can we handle 600 million more tourists in 5 years? Growth was something that was really strongly built into the tourism development, not just in the last 1 decade, but in the last 6 decades. This was actually bringing us to the problems that we were discussing very intensively before the pandemic. And those are the problems of overtourism. So this growth that was happening was not an equal growth. So, and similar as in the general economy, we were meeting the huge inequality and imbalance, and I will be talking about that in the next slide. But just, you know, when mentioning the tourism, this is a picture from Barcelona, and that was in year 2018. So, and we were really out loud talking, the tourism has its limits, and the limits are put by the environment. And, you know, it's not just the tourism, the global economy has its own limits, and the environment is putting those limits to all of us. In tourism also, environment and the local population was also setting up the limits of acceptance, because they were not happy with the tourism development happening at the certain places. And then I come up to this point that I was mentioning before, and it's a point of inequality. So all of this huge growth and over-tourism was not happening all around the world. It was happening on the specific spaces, and not specific points, specific destinations. The picture of Paris. In 2019, 35 million people was visiting Paris. Every third visitors of France was actually coming to Paris. A huge pressure on the city that was happening not just in Paris, it was happening in Amsterdam, in Barcelona, many cities around the globe. And so it was a huge inequality and concentration on the supply side, and on the same side, and on the same time on the demand side. Not everyone, not 8 billion people living on this world today were available, actually could afford to travel. All of this travel was driven by the small percentage of hyper mobile individuals. The research from Sweden is saying that 3% of the Swedish residents is generating more than a quarter of all of the travel. And the research from France are saying that 5% of the French are generating more than half of the all international travels that French residents are actually making. So actually, yes, the huge growth, burden on the environment, and very, very huge inequality in terms of supply and demand. Tourism was also under the huge pressure from safety, you know, kind of guaranteeing safety and security. So I had this slide on my lectures like 10 years ago, but I really and sincerely do not believe that pandemic will ever reset the world as it did in the last year and a half. So one of the biggest challenges for tourism development, even before the pandemic, was safety and security. And now we are not talking we are talking also about the health, safety and security that is going to change significantly how the tourism is going to look like in the 21st century. And as I said, the huge burden on the environment. The tourism is responsible for 12% of the global CO2 emission, majority of them coming from the air transportation, which is collapsing in the last year. Tourists use 3 to 5 times more water than the local population, and the tourism generates 35 million tons of the solid waste. Those are just some of the facts that are showing what burden tourism was actually making to the environment even before the COVID pandemic. So if you ask me, even before the pandemic, we had the scenario of the perfect storm. Basically, but this growth was so economically lucrative that in the sense of the companies, governments, even the individuals, we were not really sincere that we can stop tourism and we can actually change it in its development in the other direction. So then pandemic happened. It was at the beginning, and I'm really impressed that I'm part of the meeting in which a very educated, and I would say very smart people are believing that once when we all are going to be vaccinated, the things are going to come back at what it was. I don't see that this could possibly be a scenario, because this is a crisis, and it was a huge crisis, much larger than we are willing to admit. It was not just being locked in our houses, and here in Europe and here in Slovenia, we were locked for the last 6 months. And just recently, we were just slightly getting the freedom to go to have a coffee outside if there are only 4 of us at the table. So, and that was a huge, I would say, huge shock that is actually bringing a lot of changes to the society, to the economies, to the way we live, and absolutely a lot of changes for tourism. So the COVID actually, just again, the basic data showing that the tourism is actually coming back 30 years back, actually. So we are at the numbers from 1990s. Loss of the global GDP due to the loss of tourism was between 2.8 and 4.2%. I think the latest study of OECD are saying they're around 3.5%. So basically, if we lost the global GDP, between 5 and 6, half of that loss is on account of tourism and transportation, of course, because they are very, very much related. Loss of 6.6 to 11.7 millions of jobs just at the EU level. So when I say these numbers, they look huge, but if I just say that 60% of the tourism jobs at Europe are under the risk and under the threat of being lost. So 60%, that's a lot of, we're looking at a very huge problem that is going to be, and those jobs, tourism is mainly employing females that are lower educated and younger population. Those are very fragile part of the society, and they are going to be, their jobs are under the threat today, and a lot of them already lost their jobs due to the crisis. The research and the studies that we did for Slovenia were showing that every 3rd company during this year will not survive the crisis and actually will be shut down due to the COVID effects. So every 3rd company actually will not end up the year 2021. And OECD also estimates that 80% of the international tourism arrivals will be dropping in 2020. They estimated this in November, and they were actually quite close. The final balance was, I think, minus 74% communicated by UNWTO. At the EU level, the European Travel Commission was actually in their report, they actually communicated that number of international tourism arrivals in Europe was minus 68%. end of the 2020. And there is a large difference between the countries in terms of the effects of the COVID on the specific country. For instance, in Austria, our neighbor, they were having minus 40% of tourism arrivals and overnights in 2020, and they were doing pretty much the best within the EU. Slovenia, for instance, had minus 52%. And that was on the account of very huge stimulation of the domestic demand. This is the marketing campaign. Now it's a time for you, my Slovenia, that actually Slovenian Tourism Board was doing last year. Besides this, Slovenian government, we were preparing that document, and that intervention for them and doing the calculations was introducing the Slovenian tourism vouchers. They were giving 200 euros to each adult Slovenian to spend the holidays at Slovenia, and 50 euros to each child. Due to this, many companies managed to survive and many jobs were actually saved. So that was the intervention that we were introducing, stimulating local demand and kind of trying to survive and kind of bear the year with those vouchers that governments were subsidizing to the local population to spend their holidays at home. So domestic demand will be driving the growth further on. I just recently read the study from Germany, and 60% of the Germans already booked holidays in Germany for 2021. So they do not plan to leave the country due to the current pandemic conditions. So I don't want to sound negative, but I do think that in Europe, 2021 will not be, and probably around the globe, will not be much better than 2020, and that the recovery in tourism is probably coming in 2022. And this recovery will actually be on the part of the industry that will manage to survive those very difficult times. Beside that, we were actually facing the global airline industry that collapsed in 2020. The final numbers were minus 85%, something like that. The European Union was giving a lot of financial aids to the national, there were no direct funding at the EU level for the companies, but the national government, through the Next Generation program that now is being launched and countries will be receiving quite a lot of funds, were funding the national travel companies like Lufthansa, Air France, Air Italy, etc. So basically a lot of government aids was actually awarded to the airline companies just to survive those times, but the numbers are just terrifying. So not just terrifying, but really significantly drop in the airline industry. And beside that, there is a strong pressure to actually, on the long run, reduce the flying habits that we had in the past. And I have to admit that some of them were really not necessary. Traveling to China for 3 days or traveling at the end of the world just to have a conference speech when we can still use the technology was not really the necessity. So definitely we will be seeing a lot of changes in the airline industry travel patterns as well. So impact was very different. I've been working a lot with the companies, also with the governments, and you could see that there is a huge difference. Some of the companies, believe it or not, I was working with a company in Switzerland. They have their capacities today booked out until the end of October. They are at a remote area, nature, very small. They have 20 large rooms, and they are booked out through the whole summer and most of the not winter, but most of the until October mainly. So they were doing really good in 2020 as well. So there is a huge difference, you know, what we can see, but generally what I'm seeing working with the companies, the mountain nature-based destinations that have a lot of spa, wellness, selfness program are actually they are doing okay. While we have a seaside destinations, you know, larger resorts, they are having a lot of problems, struggling a lot to survive. And frankly, I don't think that many of them will survive this crisis, because this year again going to be brutal. So hotels in Europe, those are data for Europe. They reduced the prices for 17% last year, and revenue per available room was reduced for 60%. Revenues in restaurants -60%. Tour operators were really highly hurt. And what we are seeing now, the tourism is becoming much more individual. And I do think that this is something what is going to stay. We are prone to actually do it, individually and not in the crowds. Heritage sites -90% and MICE -80 to -90%, depends on the countries. And now within those, there are different segments. Like I told you, within the hotels, resort, seaside hotels was probably going to -80, while the mountain, smaller property was actually having a plus, having an increase of revenues in 2020. So the 10 key lessons, I try to kind of summarize them just to be brief, that we learned, or actually maybe I learned during this year working on many and several different fronts. I would say before those 10 lessons, I would say the first thing that we have to learn, I think that the things are not going to come back, and those changes that are happening today are historical. And I really do think that actually the way how do we live and the way how we operate, it is going to change significantly, because this is a longer term significant shock for the economy, for the society, and for the individuals. And having this said, the tourism is a part of the society, is part of the economy. So I don't see the possibility that it's not going to affect tourism, even though I have also a couple of colleagues that believe the tourism it's coming back as we know it. But I will come to that later on in proposing the scenario of the future recovery. The 10 key lessons. So the domestic market is something that is recovering faster, and we will have to rely on this. This is, I know that in Africa, the domestic market has a limited purchasing power, but what we are seeing now, it's actually that many recovery strategies are based on the domestic market and probably the markets within the radius of 500 kilometers. So basically, those are the main markets from which demand is generated, and this is kind of going to drive the growth until 2023. MICE industry is going to change significantly. Half of the tourism in Europe is actually generated from business tourism, and we can see here that actually a lot of things are changing. Now we are having this conference virtually, and I remember last year when we started teaching online, it was a terrifying experience for most of us. But this year, I think it's much more comfortable for students, for us, and actually we kind of if we invested in developing, I'm not saying that only online teaching will stay, but definitely we are talking about a hybrid and blended ways that will be present, and the same goes for MICE. So hybrid and virtual form are really taking its starts. And generally the digitalization, we are also witnesses of the huge changes in terms of how we live, and the digitalization is taking a huge part of our lives. And I will be talking about that towards the end of the presentation. Then the share of last minute and direct booking is increasing. So we are deciding, are we go on the last minute, last couple of days actually, which is very stressful for the companies as well. The share of the longer trip is increasing. This is a good news. Finally, after so many years, now when people are deciding to leave, they're going for a longer time because they have to study all of the protocols, how they can get out of the country, how can they get in. So basically they have to be in the bubble. So this is actually, I've been skiing this year. I have to tell you that, and it was not such a pleasant experience anymore, because you cannot go to restaurants. You have to be in your own cottage. and you know, on the ski area you had to have, so it is a tourism still, but it's not it's not something that we kind of were familiar with. So but the longer trips are increasing. So once when we decide to go to holidays, we are staying longer. Great concern for safety and hygiene standards, especially on planes and hotels. So people are being very much concerned, and you know, this is again, health standards is something that we will have to be discussing a lot more in tourism in the future. Great interest for private accommodation, higher than for hotels. People tend to book apartments, you know, entities in which they will feel that they will be alone, and less hotels. Luxurious, family-friendly accommodation, eco, boutique were winning in the last year. The data were also showing that people, you know, if they decided to travel, they were actually treating themselves a bit more, stretching a bit more, going towards something, you know, more luxurious than they could usually afford, and also staying in the remote locations, nature, family-friendly capacities. Price wars were also on the horizon. The city destinations are really suffering a lot. Also, but even the price wars are not helping, because the demand cannot be generated, because the people cannot cross the borders. And uncertainty and lack of information and rapidly changing instructions are melting down the tourism. Here I'm talking about the protocols. At the EU level, we are now talking about the green digital certificate, which is still not functional. Just a couple of days ago, the many associations, including Nextour, European Travel Committee, Association of the European Travel Agencies, were writing a document to the European Commission asking them to really enforce the digital certificate before June and July, before the summer season. Unfortunately, I'm not optimistic, because still the protocols are decided at the member states level. Just an example, I'm here in Slovenia and I have an hour to Croatia, which is our bordering country. In Slovenia, you can enter the country if you are vaccinated with, for instance, AstraZeneca vaccine, and you have 21 days after the vaccination. If you want to go to Croatia, you have to have 2 shots. 1 shot is not enough. This is just a brief example, you know, and it's our drive. We are not close. Unfortunately, I really hope that this will happen, but you know, uncertainty and lack of information, and this digital certificate is still not fully functioning, because the countries have their own requirements when crossing the borders within the EU. And I'm not just talking about outside of the EU. And then again, fear of the job loss and recession. It's also melting down the demand, because the people are afraid that the economic shocks from the COVID-19 are coming, and are a bit more precautious in their spending. So the recovery, IATA is saying 23, that's International Association of the Air Transportation, up to 2025. UNBTO just changed the predictions. 2024 to 25 is recovery years. So basically, yes, we still expect that this year is going to be a tough one, recovery starting in 22, and then let's say in 25, we are talking about a, let's say, more sincere recovery of tourism. The potential development scenarios. I developed this one when we were writing this report for the European Parliament on relaunching the tourism and the transportation, trying to put up everything in a couple of scenarios. This is what we economists love. And then, you know, something between the scenarios can happen as well. So the scenario 1 is the tourism will bounce back to pre-COVID level. There's still a significant segment of stakeholders that do believe in this scenario. So, you know, was a shock. We are going to get, you know, funding. We're going to forget about this. And, you know, we are coming back to where we started. We really want to come back in 2019 and continue business as usual. Scenario 2 is that tourism will actually become more resilient, will change significantly. We'll use this crisis as a catalyst of change and really invest all of its power and energy to become more digital and green. This would be the dream scenario, and a very, very romantic one, I would also say. I don't believe that this one will happen either, because the tourism companies at this point are at the very difficult, in order for this scenario to happen, we would need a lot of capital to invest in tourism to rebuild it, to be different, to be more green, and to be more digital. You know, this is not easy. Greening the tourism industry, meaning also greening the transportation, meaning investing a lot of money in the railroad infrastructure, for instance, investing a lot of money in the sustainable accommodation. So those are very significant investments we are talking about. And unfortunately, the companies do not have a capacity to do this investment now. Some of them are doing the changes, but in this scenario is that we really try to rebuild the tourism in different levels. The third scenario in that we will meet, the tourism will reduce significantly. We will talk about the tourism of smaller number and higher prices. So basically, this is a long recovery phrase, but significantly reduced. So we're talking about a smaller tourism and you know, the one that will actually take a longer time to recover. Unfortunately, I do believe that actually somewhere here I may be very much wrong. You know, I'm just saying this as my based on the knowledge that I have at the moment, and this is very. It is very no one can really say. You know, you really have to know how to forecast the future, and even that, you know, in this very uncertain time, is very hard to say. But what we are seeing now, I do think that maybe scenario will take the place. Nevertheless, reinvention of tourism, crisis as a catalyst of change. Hopefully, we will see this as well. So basically, changing the tourism significantly and talking about more green, smarter, and more inclusive tourism. If we want to do is basically working with the companies and government, I see a couple of main policy or development strategies that will have to take place. Digitalization is number one. I do see a lot of operators investing heavily in digitalization, not just of marketing, but of operations. So basically digital, you know, we talk at the EU level now, we talk about the industry 5.0, and at the same time it's a fully digitalized economy, and the tourism as being part of it. I do see and think that we'll talk much more about the digitalization of the whole industry. I don't have time to set up the examples, but at the moment here in Slovenia we're also working on the digital transformation strategy. The Spain is doing pretty much the same, many Croatia as well. So basically a lot of action in this pillar. Sustainability, but sustainability not just in building the values, but also investing in sustainable infrastructure. So Slovenia just prepared the recovery strategy for the EU, and based on this strategy, they'll get the funding. And the special chapter is dedicated to tourism. 80% of all of the funding is for building the sustainable accommodation. So basically, we will need quite a lot of effort in changing the development strategy towards really, you know, investing also in sustainable infrastructure. Employees retention. At the moment, what we are also seeing that a lot of people left the tourism industry because if they are, you know, eager to be developed, you know, many of them did not want to wait for 2 years for the industry to recover. So we see quite, and of course the unemployment, you know, tackling that as well. But, you know, employment retention is something, or actually just not just keeping, but setting up the teams now is something what the companies are really dealing with. Service quality is something that the customers will really demand. So a lot of operators invest in the service quality and health security. So if we talk about a development strategy, this is something not just on the operators, but also government level that is really highly discussed among the many EU member states at the moment. Couple of examples before I finalize, and then I will wrap up and leave the time for the discussion. This is the example from Greenland, inspiring staycation campaigns, again, kind of relying on the domestic market or on the closed markets for bringing tourism closer to locals. And, you know, interestingly, you know, last year people were really, oh, we cannot spend the holidays this is not, you know, the travel is not domestic. But this year, you know, people are less, at least here in the area where we live, people are less frustrated about it and very happy to be spending the holidays closer to home. Another example is in terms of digitalization. I'm not sure did you notice, but Amazon was actually launching Amazon Explore. Those are it's a pilot project, but Amazon is really working on it. And if you go on the Amazon page, there is a small section dedicated to exploring the virtual tours. So actually you can go, you can take a tour in Africa and actually having a guide being with you. The tour is taking place at real time. So you're really at the tour, but you're virtually there. And the guide is actually taking the place with you. Ljubljana, the capital of Slovenia, have several tours on Amazon Explore. Not sure is this going to be a future of tourism. You know, we will still want the real experience, but the virtual tourism in one or another shade, you know, as a sale opportunity or as a, you know, kind of reminder will be something that is happening. An interesting one from Iceland. They were also making an innovative product in which you actually order your tour traveling through Iceland, and you come to the airport, you get a car, and in the car there is a GPS with all of the points you have to stop. The hotels are pre-booked, the restaurants, the attractions. So you just play go, and then actually the GPS is taking you to the locations that are actually pre-booked for you, and it's taking you to your organized trip. Again, safe and very much digital experience as well. Virtual platforms, we're just using one. There are many of them. And for sharing knowledge, for meetings. So maybe just a short story. I was working with a company, a quite successful one here in Slovenia. They were organizing events, concerts, you know, larger scale events, sports and cultural here in the area. And when the COVID started, the owner, she's a female, she said, "Okay, I'm just going to close up. That's it. We're going to just close up the business." But then she actually kind of got the motivation to change the whole model and to start organizing the digital events. She employed 2 new persons just a month ago. So they were going largely on digital, you know, setting up the platforms, designing, because even the digital has to be organized. You need a lot of knowledge to do it properly. They were going that far that on the conference you would getting at home the small package with the drink and and you had an online party, which I have to say was not that bad after all. So basically, you know, it's all about those changes that are taking place, and, you know, sleeping over all of the crisis, believing that everything is going to be the same, I think is not the right one. So that was a simple example on the digital. On sustainable, you know, Accor was actually working a lot on the zero food waste initiative. You know, trying to significantly reduce the food waste, which we have enormous amount of the food that is wasted in the tourism industry, 30 to 35%. So they were working a lot of reducing the food waste, introducing a live cooking, you know, developing many different interventions within their operations in order to reduce the food waste significantly in their hotels. This one is about a product and service development, and I think I'm getting to the end. That is a small hotel, not that small actually, hotel in Dubrovnik in Croatia. That is a very well-known destination that they were really totally dependent on the international market, and they were suffering a lot, minus 90% of the international arrivals of tourists in the last year. But this specific property at that destination was doing great. And what they did, it's a very digital experience. So you check online, you check out on, so everything is actually, you can check in, check out online. And what they were doing, they were actually not selling the accommodation, but experiences. So they were selling you the fishing trips for a couple of days. You know, this is something that, you know, should be normal, but, you know, and they were actually doing it all very, very high on their priority was the health and security standards that were clearly communicated. The experience was digital and very much focused on service quality. So that property was actually doing quite well, but they are a smaller one, and they have a larger units. Safety and hygiene schemes, safe travels are launched by VTTC last year. Many countries introduced them all around the world. So basically, this is something that will increase travel confidence, and it's going to be a necessity. And we're just going to go even higher in the requirements for safety and hygiene standards. So I'm going to wrap up. I hope that I was on time. So basically, just to summarize, humanity here comes first, and this is health and humanitarian crisis. And tourism is being very much hurt because of it. But at the end of the day, those are human lives that we are talking about, and there is no travel that should, be priority before the health and saving the lives. COVID will generally not change the essence of tourism. We will be still traveling for the relaxation, to discover the world. So the basic motives will be there, but it will change the way how we travel and the travel patterns. I pretty much believe in that. Economic stabilities will be lungs. So basically, without economic stability, the long-term survival will be very, very hard. Environment is a heart, and we really have to take care of our heart much better than we did in the past. Hopefully, we will do that when we are rebuilding and rethinking the strategies for the future. And technology are the tools. They are helping us to optimize. They are hands and legs. They're helping you to move. So basically, kind of biting into this apple as soon as possible is something that we all actually have to do. So we need to have a good starting point, and actually those are nature, outdoor, small scale, remote, spa, wellness is something. Those are the keywords of the last year travel and tourism. People were really looking for those. We need to be bold in our strategies, to be rebuilt, to innovate, to make tourism different, to increase the productivity. So basically, and increasing the productivity means building tourism products and services based on more knowledge than we did in the past. Do the recovery and resilience at the same time, not recovery and then resilience. They go hand into the hands. Retaining the staff, and tourism, and again, is about the people and thinking about those people and how they can still be part of the tourism industry. I think here we will have the hugest social problems, and again, the problems in restarting the tourism. So it's something this is really, really crucial, and the key areas: superb experience, sustainability, and digital. This is something that I'm really hearing a lot in the last year. Thank you very much for listening and for bearing. Hvala, this is in Slovenian. I'm going to stop to share the screen now and giving it back to you, Lucy, for the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Professor, for your nice presentation. I think we have a number of questions for you in the chat message, but one of the questions was sent directly to my message, and I think you addressed it, but I will still read it. If domestic tourism demand is driving growth, will it be universal or just for high economic countries where disposable income and more time is available to these citizens? So that is one of the questions that you will consider while reading through the remaining of the questions. Also, Dr. Karla, you have some questions in the chat message. You should be able to respond to them. But I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Professor Ljubica for the awesome presentation. What I think should be emphasized from her presentation is that we can combine recovery and resilience. And she gave us a forecast scenario for recovery, where there are three possibilities: either going back to tourism the way it was, or building resilience, or maybe a kind of tourism which has gone down in terms of the numbers of tourists. So I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome all the speakers to a Q&A session, because we had some pending questions for Professor Antonia Correia about vaccines. I would like Antonia Correia to first take the stage, then she'll be followed by Karla, and finally Professor Ljubica. You can check the chat section for questions that have been raised to you. Thank you.
Oh, definitely, it's important that we have the vaccines, but I don't think that vaccines is the only way to recover from tourism. As a matter of fact, I think that the world will not be the same after this. So I don't think that we will recover and going back to over tourism as we did before, because now people are more concerned with their safety, and even if we have the vaccines and the immunity, we will think about how to contact with the other people. It will take a long time to recover and to gain again the trust to be involved with the other people in the same place and to have again over tourism. That's why I was thinking, I think that Africa could be has a very good opportunity to recover and to be one of the best destinations to recover from this crisis. I don't think vaccine is the only way. Okay, so we are trying to vaccinate everyone, but we do not know quite well what are the consequences of the vaccines. And I don't think that vaccines is the only way. We need to gain trust again, and we are not very trust nowadays about the safety. So the world will not be the same, I think. I have more questions, Lucy.
Thanks. I think that was the question. Maybe Judy, you have a comment, or Liz, you're the one who raised the question.
Yeah, I had a question for Professor. She talked about destinations need to give reassuring messages to travelers that it is safe to travel to Africa. And my question was, who needs to give this reassurance? Should it come from a business, the Ministry of Health in that country? Does World Health Organization have to endorse these messages of assurance? Because as a business, can I just tell my clients it is safe to travel to Africa? So who should give these reassuring messages?
The reassuring message has to come from the destination management or organizations. I don't think that health government should be involved on that. In Portugal, we put something like the stamp of clean and safe circulating by the tourism board, and the results were not very good. Why? Because clean and safe was a very easy way to get this certification, and people are not very trustable about this. So the issue is to reassure the messages that is safe, based on pictures, based on messages, but this has to be a message for all the country, not only by the companies or by the law. You yourself, you could, even if you try to attract your tourists based on a message of safety, is not enough. I think that we need to go in protocols and European and national, worldwide protocols of hygiene and safety, and these kind of protocols has to be communicated by the destination management organizations. Okay, by the state, by the government, not by us as entrepreneurs.
Okay, shall I just follow that question? And this I will open up to all the other presenters for this afternoon. I have learned quite a lot. I've been busy scribbling. This question, it is important to give reassurance messages to travelers. Now, we all know that there are concerns of vaccine inequalities, that there are destinations that will get vaccinated more quicker and easier than other destinations. How are we going to give reassurance to our resident communities that it is okay to receive tourism? Who should give them that reassurance? Yes, travelers will get reassurance from the DMO. Who should give the communities reassurance that it is okay to receive visitors? How do they get that assurance? Any of our presenters this afternoon can take on that, or any other person in the audience, because it's a pertinent question. Do receiving destinations and communities need reassurance of their own safety?
I would nominate Karla to respond to that question. Yeah, she spoke about so much social issues and the place of the hosts.
I'm thinking that local communities absolutely need reassurance. Specifically in the context of what some of us were discussing in terms of over-tourism. If we're going to just open the floodgates and expect tourism to function as it did pre-COVID, destination communities absolutely should be concerned. And maybe part of the response is this may put increasing pressure on governments to ensure that there's less inequities in terms of the vaccine kind of rollout. It's definitely not an easy answer. Not an easy question, I mean.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not an easy question to answer. But it is something worth thinking about. And destinations need to think about how they're going to protect and give reassurance to host communities in destinations as they receive tourism back. Thank you very much, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you, Judy, for your questions, and Professor Antonia for your responses. We still have more questions coming in. So I would like the next presenter to respond to questions to be Karla. There was a question for you about something about over-tourism, if you saw it in the chat message. And then I'd asked you a question whether there was a sustainable size for tourism, because you spoke about the growth.
Right. Okay. I think this is a challenging question and worth some reflection as well. I think one of the things that we need to consider, and I think tourism providers and destinations were asked to consider this pre-COVID as well, is thinking through opportunities that travelers may be interested in the off seasons and shoulder seasons to kind of spread the benefits of tourism throughout the whole year rather than just the peak seasons. Yeah, I mean, the other piece is engaging local communities. I mean, and carrying on the response of the previous question, what we often need to remind ourselves in tourism is that there are several people who aren't directly involved or receive the benefits of tourism, but they're affected by what happens in destinations. And so we need to be very conscientious about that. And we've seen some of the responses to over-tourism, and Barcelona is a great example in terms of local communities literally feeling like they're busting at the seams with tourism. And as a consequence, locals are responding in various ways, like spray painting on the walls of the attractions or destinations, or spray painting on wheelie bins, tourists go home, you know, if they've just had enough's enough. So it's really incumbent that we take on board the perspectives of local communities. And maybe once again, this just kind of hones our proposition of this redefinition and how we define tourism, whereby we need to engage local communities in what they want. I appreciate that there's always a tension between you know, earning profit and caring for the environment or caring for peoples and that kind of idea. And that is always going to be a tension in tourism, because our governments are basically supporting lots of people, trying to encourage lots of people to come to our destinations. So there is a fine balance here. But I mean, we have to kind of forefront sustainability interests, because in the long term, we may not have destinations to invite people to if we don't care for them.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Karla, for your responses. If there's any comment or question to that. And there are still more questions and comments, and there is a document that has been shared by Professor Marina Novelli about Nyali beach over tourism in Kenya. Please download it and have a look at it if you're a delegate here. Then the rest of the speakers, please keep on checking the chat messages. There are questions. I think Ljubica, because you're the last presenter, the last few questions, all of them are yours. You are free to address them right away.
I think one of the questions from Professor Marina is about over-tourism. There was a comment that over-tourism might not return, but Professor Marina says she's afraid that there is evidence that there could be over-tourism related to revenge travel and proximity travel. I think Professor Ljubica, you can respond to that one.
Thank you. So basically, maybe first regarding the vaccine, I was just thinking when Antonia was also saying, there are still a lot of unknown things regarding the vaccine. That's why, yes, we are very happy that, you know, and yes, very good point about vaccine inequality. But again, it's still unknown how, you know, if you have a shot, do you need another shot after 6 months, 9 months, 1 year? So basically, I think we will be in this circle, even with the vaccine, you know, it will take quite some time to get onto the green wave. Regarding the over-tourism, basically, yeah, probably, you know, really much depending on how the world development will go further. You know, I'm also afraid that we will be meeting over-tourism again, because the world economy will be developing in the same way as was developed before. You know, unfortunately, there are a lot of efforts going in that direction. So we may be meeting over-tourism in the future, but that will happen, you know, on the long run, probably on the long run, or possibly what we were seeing during this Corona crisis, the destinations that were opening to tourists. I don't know, here close to our area, we had a couple of the ski destinations in Bosnia that were totally open to tourists, and they were super overcrowded. So this was happening actually at a smaller scale and points, but again, it brought so many health issues for the local community that was really questionable about the policy that was taking place at that certain area. So yes, I'm not saying that we are going to say goodbye to over-tourism, but we do have a time to rethink. And I'm not sure, Karla was talking about this, I'm not sure, you know, degrowth policy, we still talk, be very careful, you know, if you read between the lines about all of the documents that we are seeing at the global level, we still talk about the growth. But now it's a smart growth, it's resilient growth, it's green growth, but still it's growth. No one is talking about a degrowth. Basically, this is still the effort that is taking place. Frankly, you know, you know, it will have to change significantly. That growth will, you know, depend not just on the number of tourists and overnights, but also looking more deeply into the receipts. So I'm not sure to have a, direct answers here regarding the over-tourism. Yes, possibly coming back, and we are not saying goodbye to it, but now there are a lot of other issues that are tackling tourism. And the larger one is it's about the income of the local population and the people who are going to be very much hurt because of the loss of the jobs. And this is what we are seeing happening every day. And this is something that is actually putting a huge pressure, and a lot of people are dealing with this now. Yeah. I'm not sure what the other questions were. I'm trying to read, and the frightening figures was one of them. Yes, Alan, they are, unfortunately. And let me see what was else.
The other one question for you was about you talked about virtual platforms that are growing and digitization. And somebody is asking, interesting to know how local stakeholders will benefit from virtual tourism, other than the big companies like Amazon, Apple, and Google taking too big a slice.
Well, that's kind of world we created and we live in. So the tourism was part of the disruption before. So basically, if I read correctly what they are doing, they just noticed that there are a lot of guides that are unemployed at the moment. So this would be a great platform, let's say. But again, it's going to be a global that could connect the local guides, so they are actually can offer. And yes, of course, the global corporation are going to benefit as they did in the past, probably from those kind of solutions. I just posted the Visit Amazon, just Explore Amazon, just to show that actually the large and big world company are dealing with the tourism as well today. But there are a lot of smaller ones and developing at the regional level, destination level, trying to Far Islands, for instance. Far Islands need a great platform, digital platform in which the chatbot is being really smart and useful. So maybe that would be a better example, and hopefully really that we won't have a lot of large disruptors in tourism in the future. And that we will be seeing also a lot of those developments coming also from the local community. So I'm not sure what the other questions are. Not convinced. Over tourism, vaccine inequality was there. The governments the governments are protecting the host communities. Yeah, but maybe I'm not sure that I understood the question that you, Judy, was raising. I think it's the tourism is here. If the government does not allow people to come into the country, that's the game over for tourism. So basically, it's very much dependent on the other policies at the moment. So that's why we talk about those ununified protocols, even at the EU level. Even if I want to go now to Austria, which is hour away from Slovenia, and to Croatia, both countries demand very different documentations. So I think this is something that is being a large issue that we are dealing with which we are dealing at the moment.
Great.
And the local communities are proposing it.
There's a question here from Agnes. Agnes, allow me, I don't know if I can rephrase your question. Are the EU countries doing anything to synchronize travel policies? The examples that you've just given us, every country has a different travel policy in relation to COVID-19. Are there efforts to synchronize this so that travel can open again?
Yes, they were actions. Actually, the first one was last year in May, when the European Commission was actually proposing this list of green, orange, and red countries. So, but again, that was the national level competence. So the European Commission is proposing, and then at the national level, the governments are deciding how they're going to act. At the moment, the European Commission again is proposing the green digital passport, but again, the national governments are, because that's their jurisdictions, are deciding on what. In this green digital passport, the guidelines are the vaccination, negative test, or if you already had a COVID, are the three conditions under. If you have something of those, you can travel. But then again, different countries have different rules that's then the issue, because some of the countries will say 21 days after the first shot, other countries will have, you have to have 2 shots, and then 9 days after that. So here now we see the differences. So they are working on it, but it's not still fully functional.
It's good to know that at least there's some effort towards it. It's a challenge that we have to live with. Eco Adventures is asking, what next? We have seen the health and safety protocols. We have seen the safety stamps and seals for destinations and individual suppliers. Now we have the vaccine. What next do you predict? That's open to all the presenters for this afternoon. What next could be a requirement as tourism restarts?
Well, I don't think that we solved the second one. You know, so I think that still, you know, once when we are unifying the protocols, it is going to be much easier, but protocols are still not unified. And you have to do the master thesis in order to start, you know, some countries still demands quarantine. Some can, you know, I think the healthy and safety protocols, yes, we do have them, but the travel protocols are not unified yet. And I think until we don't resolve that one is a big issue at the moment.
So the next big issue is harmonizing the travel protocols after the vaccinations, and you have given us very real-time examples on that. I think I don't see any more questions. I returned this to Lucy, but Professor Marina is asking to make a comment on the vaccine. Then Lucy, it's back to you. I was just helping to read the questions. Thank you. Professor, you needed to make a comment on vaccine?
I just wrote it in the chat, but it's worth mentioning that the point made about the vaccine and the great hope of the vaccine, which is a kind of a hidden issue which nobody seems to be talking about, is that the regulation refers to 6 months after recovery from COVID, 6 months from the second shot, and potentially having the test done. So personally, I believe that the only way forward is testing and tracing. That's the only way, because even if you've had a vaccine, that is going to be valid for 6 months, which means if you look at the European population, the lucky one who got their shot, like for instance, the vast majority of doctors and medical staff and first line staff, after June, they won't be able to travel because their validity of their passport in a way would be expired. So effectively, we need to be a little careful placing too much hope into the vaccine. That's my personal opinion. And it's something that nobody seems to read through the line when there are discussion about the vaccination being the great hope.
Thank you for that comment. It just complicates the whole challenge of travel protocols, which is the next hurdle. We are agreeing that it's the next hurdle that we need to overcome in the COVID-19, amongst the many challenges of COVID-19. Lucy, it's back to you.
Sorry, I was connecting my audio. Yeah, we had a very awesome afternoon session with interesting presentations from speakers, and they were extremely kind enough to give us detailed information about different topics where they have spent time with their colleagues researching on. And we really learned a lot about tourism entrepreneurship and economic resilience in tourism. Specifically, we began with Professor Antonia Correia, who gave us some insights about the role of DMOs, especially communicating during this pandemic time, and how their messaging is interpreted by audiences. And we drew a lot of questions on that issue. Then Dr. Karla gave us her interpretation of sustainability and how sustainability can be part of resilience, giving us some key recommendations for building resilience with sustainability, especially focusing on social entrepreneurship and purpose economy, with other aspects like even degrowth or redefining tourism. So if you are able to check out her work with Professor Higgins Despiol about redefining tourism, you can go and check it out, where they have given a new definition that shows communities are part of tourism, which was originally ignored. And finally, Professor Ljubica has given us a scenario or a forecast for what tourism recovery looks like. So I'm very grateful that at the end of today's presentation, we have gotten quite some good in-depth knowledge, and we are able also to ask ourselves more questions when we are thinking how to build resilience for our destinations in Africa. I'm sure from the presentations of all the speakers, they have been able to respond to our questions and written valuable information that we can come back, think through, question again, carry on the conversations in different platforms in how we can build a sustainable future for Africa's tourism. As we emphasized in the morning presentation, that sustainability is the only future that Africa's tourism needs. So as usual, for each presentation, we will get a recording of each. And also maybe you can get in touch with some of the speakers, especially if you feel there were detailed issues that needed clarification. Yeah, some of them will be able to share with you their contact details. So tomorrow we are proceeding with the discussion like today, starting at 10 a.m. East African time. All speakers are welcome to attend, and all the delegates who participated today. I'm very much excited that we had some speakers who will be presenting tomorrow in here with us today. I've seen Dr. Violet Kafi is here, and also Dr. Fred Odwori from Strathmore University. Professor Marina Novelli will be part of the panelists tomorrow, and also Velma Kiome will be back tomorrow as a panelist. So at this point, I would like to hand over the session to Judy Kefagona, my colleague, to tell us the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. It's been a delight spending this day listening to very insightful presentations from our presenters from morning until now. We have added on to our knowledge and even boosted our sustainability vocabulary. I would like to hear what you have learned today. Job says his takeaway is that tourism should be allowed to recover and build back better in phases. I think that's a good learning from today. It cannot happen all at once. Destinations need to manage expectations of stakeholders while prioritizing well-being of citizens. He almost summarizes what we've been talking about today. Then Professor Marina reminds us that it's been a great session showing the complexity of the world we live in and the need for questioning carefully all our options. This is where tourism finds itself, that the reality is that it's no longer going to be that straight growth curve like Professor Ljubica told us. It's more complex now for tourism, and tourism must begin to rethink. So thank you for being here. I am taking away a very important summary list from Professor Ljubica. Almost summarizes what we've had since morning from everyone. But I think you said something very significant for me, that COVID-19 will not change the essence of tourism. It will change travel patterns. So everybody thinking about recovery and restarting must take this into account, that it will change travel patterns. For all of us here who believe that sustainability is the future, it was music to my ears to hear you say that while economic stability will be the lungs going forward, environment is our heart. And that is very important for us going forward. Last but not least, we have also learned that we cannot disengage recovery and resilience from restarting tourism. They are not standalone things that now we are recovering and then we are building resilience and then we will see what else we can pick to restart tourism. It is a holistic package that recovery, resilience, and restart will go hand in hand. In fact, putting recovery and resilience together will lead to a better and a fairer restart for tourism in my analysis. So tourism restart does not have to wait for recovery, because some people are thinking, let's recover and then we'll do all those things you're talking about, restart. No, recovery and resilience are what makes a good tourism restart. So as we leave here, we want to thank again all our speakers from the bottom of our hearts for being here, for taking your time, for sharing your experiences. We hope to remain in touch with you. We will share your presentations widely, because this is knowledge that has been invested in and it has been tested. So thank you very much to our speakers who are here and will be speaking to us tomorrow. We look forward to hearing from you. Tomorrow we have interesting discussions. We'll be touching on human capital development. We will be talking about the opportunities and choices for Africa. That will be a very interesting panel that closes our discussions tomorrow. We will hear something about how education is important for building resilience and how we can start this education at a younger age, not just at college level, for our young ones, because the future actually belongs to them. We have to secure the future for our children. So thank you again for taking your time, for being here. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning. And before I leave, I want to give our speakers to give us their parting shots. That's one important thing that we should remember as we leave this afternoon session. Thank you. Shall I start with Professor Antonia, then I'll go to Karla and finish with Professor Ljubica. Your parting shot for our audience this afternoon.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed to be with this interesting panel. Ljubica, you have a very nice plan, and also I enjoy very much what Karla presented, and more than that, it was very, very interesting to listen and to see the attention and the enthusiasm you are putting in all you are doing. So keep doing the best you could do to safeguard the tourism.
Thank you, Antonia. Professor Karla, I was very, very intrigued by the whole, your whole concept of tourism social entrepreneurs. And I think it is something that should be spoken more in tourism in relation to sustainability. But your parting shot, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that we, as I mentioned in my presentation, we don't adequately pay attention to the role of women, and women have been recognized as the most adversely impacted by COVID-19. And I was just thinking back to the initial kind of introductory meeting that we had on Monday, and it was all women. And so I was thinking that, yeah, it's very important for us to think about. I think the role of tourism social entrepreneurs have been overlooked. And so it's an important kind of avenue to think through the contributions that we can make to communities and progressing sustainability and regenerative systems. And then just thinking through using the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a framework for progressing sustainability. I think those are the important takeaways from my presentation.
Thank you so much, Professor Karla. And now, Professor Ljubica.
Well, first of all, thanks for invitation. Was great pleasure being here, and I'm sorry that I was not at the opening session with all of the ladies. Hopefully, we'll have the closing session as well. So basically, you know, I put my summary on the last 2 slides, and I would not like to repeat myself. But just you know, we all remember how great it is to travel, and how travel is also benefiting to our lives. Hopefully that I really hope that the travel of tomorrow and the tourism of tomorrow will be smarter, will be greener, and will be more resilient, whatever that means. Because those are great words, but when we come to the practice, it's much easier to say than to actually live and do it. So hopefully all of us tourism researchers will live it and actually do it in the future, and hopefully we will help to co-create this different tourism of the future. And now is really the time for all of us to activate and be part of the discussion, and also taking an active role in creating the government policies in this very important time for the tourism future evolution. So thank you very much for listening and for invitation once again.
Thank you very much. Yes, we will have an online coffee with all our speakers at the end of it. We will have a good time to catch up, all of us once again. We had a good meet and greet session. So thanks everyone for being here. It's 4:37. We had intended to finish at 4:30. So we are well within time. You can go have a reflective time. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And it's a good way to finish with Harriet's comment that her takeaway is that the definition of tourism should change. What a challenge. Let's pick up on that tomorrow morning with that thought from Harriet, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. Thank you for being here. Stay safe. God bless. Bye for now.